Hey friends, welcome back to the studio. I've got a sweet little project here for you today. We are going to make a six-sided faceted cup with no darting. We are not going to cut at each individual seam here. Traditionally with a faceted cut, you can cut away using a clay cutter, or you can make a template that has 8 individual notches for each segment here, and then you would have to bevel cut, slip and score each individual notch, which, as you can guess, is time consuming and has a lot of room for error, cracking at the seams, things like that. So today I'm going to show you how to do this in a really easy kind of a molding sculpting construction so that you can get these beautiful flat sides. I make this project with bare clay, and I also make this project with highly textured clay. There is a little bit of a different construction if you are using textured clay. Please see my salt and pepper tutorial, my salt and pepper shaker tutorial for these little guys, and I'll show you how to construct with highly textured using our faceted jigs. But today we are just going to use naked clay, and we are going to accentuate those beautiful flat sides. Okay, so I've got our six-sided, our 6F, which is our 6 faceted jig here. You can see really cool shape, kind of a shape that would be really hard to do unless you have a mold or something to push it against. And then I'm going to use the cutter that we have available with our combo set. So I've already got my bottom cut out, and I've got my maker's mark in there. This will be larger than the bottom of your jig to account for the about 1/4 inch clay that you are going to wrap around the jig. Make sure your jig is nice and clean. This has a couple little spots of clay. I think that's fine. If your jig has a lot of clay on it, you'll want to wipe it with a damp sponge so that our clay is not sticking to that. I am also going to add a lid on mine to make it a travel function. And instead of this drinking holes, I'm going to put a straw hole in mine today. So I've got my template that I downloaded on our website free. My dog Charlie likes to chew my templates apparently. So that's that one. You can get this free template for download on alexandriapotteryco.com under our extras tab, and then go down to templates. Now, a word on the templates. When we map these out, the template fits the jig, but it does not account for the clay that you're going to wrap around. So what I say is to safely add about a 1/4 inch of clay onto your bevel cuts, and then you can, once you know you have a good size for your clay, you can dial in your template. And you can see my permanent template has about a 1/4 inch of clay hanging off both sides. So follow instructions, print 2, and tape. Just this template's a little bit larger, so there is a 2-part construction for the paper template on that. Okay, so I'm going to bring my slab of clay over here. It is pretty, I would say it's been rolled out. We rolled this clay out days ago, but I keep it under plastic. I would say the perfect consistency for this project would be where there's still some dampness to your clay, but you're not leaving a sticky fingerprint behind. And then we are going to roll this with our, I've been using a large speedball brayer. You can find all of the extra tools that I use that we do not make are also under the extras tab under our Amazon storefront. So if you want to find some of the tools that I'm using, you can see we have them linked there exactly for you. So I am going to just flatten out my clay a little bit. I want my clay to be on the thinner side. So I used to work with about a 1/4 inch of clay, but I've been going thinner and thinner. I've been liking the results I get from that. I'm going to release my clay here. And then I'm going to bring my template over, and I'm going to cut off. I'm going to kind of reshape because I've now spread my clay out. Let me see if I can find my little knife. So I'm just going to follow my template. Now, because I'm sculpting here, I'm not going to pay too much fuss. I'm just going to eyeball the extra clay. And on this side too. I actually think we end up cutting with this project our extra clay off. We do that a few times. So this, you just need kind of a rough cut just to get into that basic shape of it. I'm not even worried about beveling my cuts right now, because we will do that as we construct. So I'm going to set my template off to the side here, and I am going to flip this slab over. The reason I'm doing that is we are going to build this upside down. So our cup would be in hand like this with the round part up and this hexagon at the bottom. But what we are going to do with the construction is keep the wider part down. So you'll want to make sure you follow that same thing with your template. So the wider part of my cup, so this would be my cup. So we're just flipping that upside down, and that is going to be my workflow. Before I bring this clay to my jig, I'm going to add a healthy amount of cornstarch here. This is just organic. It's an organic material. It's cornstarch. You can find this in most any grocery store. And I want to add a really good amount. We're going to frost this little cake here. Powdered sugar. So don't use powdered sugar. I don't think that would work. You just want to make sure that you are having a release agent on here. Just get that little corner. And this will help to keep our clay from sticking. Okay, that's really important. And then I am going to make sure that I'm cleaning up any extra cornstarch here. This is an important part of this construction because as we mold the clay against the jig, we want to make sure that we don't have any cornstarch creating a little paste for us on the other end. So we're just going to get rid of that extra cornstarch. Got my slab there, and then I've got my jig here. This is our large size. We do have 5 different sizes for this one, and then we do have some other faceted shapes, some 7-sided cafe mug shapes, things like that. But for today, we are just going to use the large, and I'm going to rock the clay slab up onto the jig here, and I'm going to immediately involve my banding wheel, okay? This project, because we are going to be doing so much turning and sculpting for this, it's going to take, let me just raise the camera up a little bit. It is going to take a fair amount of turning. If you don't have a banding wheel, you can get a Lazy Susan from the grocery store, or you can use a piece of cardboard, just something that's going to allow you to freely move your clay. So our first order of business is to line up our jig. We want the one of the sides to line up with this seam here. What we are going to do is cut along one of these facets to get our angle, and then that is going to allow us to completely hide our seam. So you can see here, as I turn this cup, you cannot tell where there is a seam. So we are going to disappear that seam. It's really important that we start off with it lined up. Now we're going to do a fair amount of cutting, so I'm not going to fuss about this too much. I just want to make sure that one of my cuts is going to line up with one of those ridges there. Okay, so when we are constructing with naked clay that has no texture, we want to be really careful because as we put pressure on the clay, you can start adding dimples and divots in with the unevenness of pressure with your hands. Our hands have all these little bumps and ridges. So once you start squeezing in that way, you can really start denting your clay, and we don't want to do that. We want to keep it as smooth as possible. But the first thing we're going to do here is find that transition point. I'll use my little, this is our petite size. There's a transition point here at the side where it goes from circle to flat, from round to flat. Right in there, we are going to put some pressure in just to start lining up our jig, okay? This is nothing. You don't have to put a ton of pressure in. We just want to start laying in that groundwork for that. So now that I've got that, you can take a clay paddle as well if you want, and you can come along and just accentuate that transition point. That's going to be our starting off point. So now we know that we've got our panels are lined up, my clay is snug around. Now we're going to start the shaping sculpting process. I like to use my red flexible ribs for this. I use 2 different sizes. You do not need 2 of these. You don't even need 1 of these. If you don't have a red rib at home, you can also do this with a damp sponge. Okay, so I am going to start at the bottom of my cup, and I'm going to just start putting in that pressure there. Now, I don't normally start at the seam. I just wanted to give you an example of what I'm doing. I'm actually going to start at the back and work my way forward so that all the clay that we're displacing moves toward that seam. But what you're looking to do is go flat on the shape, and then as you hit that ridge, see if I can do this backward for you. As you hit that ridge, you're going to apply more pressure. So I'm going to just follow my jig here. You can see where the flat points are from the top. And we are going to support the clay, and we're going to start laying in those flat ridges. You will get some dings and some marks from your red rib at the bottom. Don't fuss about that. We will erase that at the end. You can see that they're not deep enough to make any issues down here. And then we will take our red ribbon, our sponge, and make sure we get that all smooth and pretty looking. But for right now, we're really going to give this clay just a lot of pressure, and you can feel the jig through the clay. So I know where that transition point is. Once I hit that transition point, I'm just going to put a ton of pressure on the clay. I'm going to come through to this front side too. Even though we're not attached at the seam, we still want to start that preliminary shaping there. And you can see with just a few passes, hopefully the camera is picking it up well enough, you can start seeing those ridges show up right here in the clay. How cool is that? Now, I don't go over the ridge. I really want to keep that part protruding because that's where the glaze is going to catch and break right over that. Now, as you start collecting clay on your red rib, you want to take that off. Now, I had a little bit of cornstarch. If you have a lot of cornstarch on the exterior, you're really going to have some trouble doing this step because it just builds up a lot on the rib. That's why I made sure that we are pretty clean to start off with. So now I'm at this last panel in front. I can't quite close it down all the way, but I am going to get what I can. What we are doing in this step here is just getting that preliminary shape stepped in before we button up our seam. Once we button up the seam, we can really start doing a lot of work on getting these panels nice and flat. I have a little 1.5 inch brayer as well. This is really great if you've got a small enough tool to do it, just to start making contact. You will move your clay up and out, and that's okay. We're gonna cut that bottom and make it nice and even. So now I have what I would say, I'm gonna lift this up. I wouldn't do this usually, but I want you to be able to see. See how I'm starting to take shape there? Now I know I'm ready to start joining this seam, and then we will continue on shaping this cup onward and upward. So I'm just gonna grab my knife. I'm gonna start at this point here, pick a spot. We already lined up our seams to kind of overlap at that point, and I'm going to take my knife and I'm going to cut that beveled edge right along the jig. Now you will get wider towards the bottom because we do go from flat to a round shape, and that's okay if it dips in just a little bit. Remember, we are going to really do a lot of work to erase that seam, so it doesn't matter if it kind of goes a little wide in that point. And then I've got my other side here, which is almost lined up perfectly. So I'm just going to take my knife. I'm going to follow that same angle. I'm going to keep my bevel at that same angle so that these two pieces can line up really nicely. I'm going to take a little bit less off at the bottom because I think I had a little less play at that point. So now I'm going to, with dry hands, not pushing in and making a bunch of dents, I'm just going to make sure that we're going to line up really nicely before I close that up. So I like the way that looks. I'm going to take my serrated rib and I'm going to put some deep score marks all the way up to the top. And then we are going to apply some slip. Okay. I am taking good care to keep my slip towards the outer edge. I do not want to create a seal along my cup. And then I'm going to take the pressure from my hands using the jig on the inside to counter pressure. And I'm pushing to a point where that slip is squeezing out a little bit. I'm going to button up this seam here. Okay. And then we are going to go ahead and take our rib and we are going to start erasing this seam. I'm going to just put some pressure on it. And because we are right on that ridge, it's really easy to come through and just start disappearing that seam. If you hear my dog, that's Charlie. He's of course barking because he does that when I film. He must know I'm doing something in here. He says hi. So we want to erase this seam here. And as we come around and put a lot of pressure on, that seam will blend right in. So now that I've got this completely buttoned up, just clean up my schnibbies here. Now that I've got this completely buttoned up, now I'm going to support the clay from the back and I'm really going to start giving pressure. You can put an immense amount of pressure on this jig because, on the clay, because the jig on the inside is giving you counter pressure. And that's what helps us to lay in these beautiful shapes effortlessly. So I'm going to turn and I'm going to continue on getting my sides molded in. After I've buttoned up the seam, I'm going to give it one good revolution all the way around. I'm going to take some off this bottom to get it nice and even, and then we'll continue this process. You can do this process as long as you'd like, until your clay is as smooth as you'd like, and until your clay is as thin as you'd like. You could be here for a long time, or you could just make a few passes, whatever it takes to kind of get that aesthetic that you're going for. Blending in that seam there. Do a lot of work here at the round part to blend that in. Okay, so now I'm going to show you how to get this bottom nice and even. I'm going to lift it up again for you. See how we're almost taking complete shape there. Got all my ridges in. Really nice and beautiful. At this point, you could do any kind of surface decoration you wanted to with your jig in hand. This is a really great way to stamp and carve because you can hold it. This inner structure here allows you to maneuver this a bunch, which I love. Okay, so I'm going to notch out just a little U. I usually start at the seam. And we are going to keep our knife nice and flat. Notice that I am supporting the clay from the outside. And then once I get to my corners, I'm turning my banding wheel. Nice and flat. As long as your knife is at the same angle the whole time, you will get a nice flat bottom. Now, I know I have a little more work to do because I still have some gapping between the jig and the clay there. But now I have a better idea of what I'm working with because I've removed some of that excess. So I'm going to grab my other red rib here, my larger one, and I'm going to just start moving this clay up. What we want is good contact with the jig and the clay all the way around. And every time you do this, you will want to come back and trim that bottom flat again. Because as we put pressure on the clay, it's going to move. It's going to want to move side to side. But what we're going to do is by giving extra support with our hands, we're forcing that clay to move up. And then that allows us to really get that bottom nice and even. Going to keep going here. And all the way around. I'm going to take my little brayer and make sure I'm getting good contact all the way around. Especially around that seam. All right, that feels good to me. Now I'm going to go ahead and do another cut at the top. Just pick a spot, keep your knife nice and flat. You can see how much clay we've moved up, which is kind of cool. Just in that smushing process of smushing the clay against the jig, it really moves that clay efficiently. So we've got another little band off, and now I'm feeling pretty good about where we're at. I'm going to use my hands, try not to put in a bunch of divots, and I'm going to also use my clay paddle here. And just on each angle here, all 6 sides, I'm going to take this and just bring it in. And that's it. That's what we've got for construction. It is really a very fun project. I'll show you how to get the bottom and the optional top on, and then we are all good to go. We will be all done. So I'm going to score my foot while the jig is in and while we are still upside down. It's just easier to do it at this point. And then I'm going to flip this guy over. And what we did on the bottom, we're going to do on the top. We want to make sure, there's our top. We want to make sure that our top is nice and level. And it's the easiest thing to do because all you have to do is just follow the jig with a flat knife. And usually there's just a little bit that comes up around the seams. And that's that. That's how we make our top nice and level. This isn't so big a deal, but I'm going to add a lid on the top. So I want to make sure that I've got a nice level top to add that onto. So I'm going to come through with my sponge and just clean up a little bit. Most of these divots and extras that those little dents from my red rib, I will come and clean up at Leather Heart. I'm not going to worry about it here at this point. Okay, so that looks good to me. Everything looks nice and even. I'm just going to release the clay from the jig just a little bit. You don't want to misshape at this point. You just want to make sure that the clay isn't going up and over your jig and it isn't stuck. And when we release this jig, which we are going to do now, there is just going to be a small twisting motion. So I'll use our bottom cutter as an example. I'm just going to twist it a little bit like this. With our round jigs, you can really twist it all the way around. But if you twist this jig all the way around, those spines, those protruding points will move into the parts that we've made nice and flat, and you'll lose those flat panels. So you really don't want to twist this all the way around. You just want to give it a little shimmy. We have put a lot of pressure on this clay. So if you're having an issue with removing, I felt mine pop already, but take your time at this point. If it is feeling stuck, just go ahead and just take your time, shimmy, shimmy, shimmy until you feel that release. Now, I'm going to keep this jig on the inside and I'm going to allow it to stay above my rim just a little bit so we can attach our bottom off. So I'm going to move this guy off to the side here and we're going to prep our bottom. So I'm going to grab the bottom that I pre-cut here. I'm going to wake this guy up a little bit. He's been sitting for a little while. I'm going to put him upside down so my maker's mark is facing out. And I'm going to score these edges. It's really easy to do this because they're short and flat sides. Kind of fun to do. And I've got my edges scored there. I'm going to apply my slip to my attachment so we're not running any risk of gluing our jig to our clay. So once you've got your slip on there, we are going to line up our cup. So I'm going to start at the flat side facing myself. It's really easy to line this up because you can see where the points are supposed to be. And then before I make any, I can see I'm a little far off on this back side here. So I'm just going to slide my cup back, make sure I'm not off on any edges. And then once I feel like we are well enough aligned, because I still have the jig in here, I'm going to put my hands and I'm going to give it some downward pressure. I know I'm giving good pressure because I can see slip splooging out, and that's what we want to see. If you need to slide it a little bit, go ahead and slide at this point. And we're going to make sure that we are nice and even here. Okay, I like the way that's looking. Now, before I take my finishing foot tool to this, I am just going to take my pencil grip angle, and all that means is however you would hold your pencil grip, that's how you'll want to hold it. And I'm going to cut off any extras down here. If you don't have extra, that's great. That means that your slab was really close to that 1/4 inch. I smushed my slab down a little bit, so my bottom and my cup I knew weren't going to match up perfectly, but it does give you a really good jumping off point. And I really am not taking off a ton of clay here. I'm just following that line at the bottom. You want these to be nice and flat. Part of the cool part about this project is seeing that those sharp angles at the bottom. I'll show you the bottom. That's really the cool part. Look at that, so you can see all those flat parts. You can see all those angles. So that's what we really want to take care to accentuate down here. Now I'm going to grab my mini shark fin foot tool and I'm going to compress that seam. I'm going to pull up any extra slip that I have at this point. Short, I don't just spin the banding wheel at this point. I just do these little short strokes, just following each side, making sure that I'm picking up that extra slip, making sure I'm putting in that nice deep bevel that I like. And I want to make sure that I'm really sealing up that join there. That's really the purpose of this, okay? It looks very pretty, really cool effect, but the purpose is that we want to make sure we're really sealing that join that we made so that we're not getting any leaking or any cracking. Okay, so if your little heart desires, you can go through and set this up for carving. I typically do carve the bottom, the bottoms of my projects, kind of like this. And I like the effect I get at the bottom there, but for these angles, I have been leaving them uncarved because I don't want to lose any of the sharpness at the corners. But that is up to you. That truly is a design choice that you can make. So now my bottom feels really good here. I will, of course, come and wipe this more at leather hard, but that's plenty good for my bottom with the little shark fin foot tool. That's plenty finished down there. So now I'm going to take this out from the top, going to shimmy it a little bit, remove that. I'm going to bring the camera overhead so you can see what we've got here. All right, let's see. Isn't that pretty in there? Sorry that the camera's shaking a little bit. I do want you to see how pretty that is. And then we are going to take care of all of those inner seams. What I'm going to do is grab my rubber shaper tool, this guy here, it's a little rubber tip. And because you can see the seam, we have really done a good job blending it from the outside. Our seam is right here. We just have to come in on the inside and make sure that that seam is looking nice on the inside as well. And then I'm going to take it along all 6 sides, picking up slip and sealing that bottom. This effect, this also gives a really great glaze effect where the glaze pulls in. I don't know if you'll be able to see on the inside of that one. Let me see if I can find a better example. There you go. So you can see the glaze pulling in those ridges at the bottom. That's really the effect that we're going for. So I've got that completely closed down now. I'm going to stick my rim cone in to make sure that we are still in the round. Making sure all my seams are good. I'm going to pop my rim cone in. This is just our regular size, and I'm looking all the way around. At this point, if you see, I do see a little bit of a bigger bump around the seam than I'd like to see. So I'm just going to come in and do some adjustments there. I don't want to put too much pressure on my flat sides here because my jig is no longer in there. But at the top by the rim cone, there's still a little bit of tension. So you can freely do that. And then I will come through and make sure that this is nice and smooth with at leather hard. So now I am going to give you some bonus content. If you were just making tumblers, if you were just making cups like this, you'd be done. That'd be it. You would just set this aside and it would dry and you would have a beautiful cup. But I'm going to take it one step further. I took a large, just a large round cutter, and I am going to, I think, I want this to line up. Let's see here. I'm a little short on this. I don't think I used a cutter that's big enough. So I'm just going to slam my clay. I want to show you what I'm doing here. We're going to improvise on the fly. I'm going to slam this down. I'm going to take one of my brayers and I'm just going to widen this top a little bit. We just want it to be able to meet all the way around. I could cut out another piece, but I'm just going to use what I have here. I'm not going to fuss with that. And I am going to, that looks better. I need just a little bit more. All right, that's wide enough. Okay, cool. So now I'm going to attach. I have to decide where I want my seam to be. I think I would like that cup or that lid. I'm going to keep my seam on one of the sides. So as I'm drinking, I have a flat side facing forward. So that's my plan. I'm going to just pop this in and I'm going to mark where I need to slip and score. Now, because I flattened this out, that clay is going to be a little softer than normal. I like it to cave in a little bit anyhow. That goes into the design that I do. So I'm just going to keep going with it, even though that clay is a little soft. You can see I usually pop in that drinking lip anyhow. So I'm going to go ahead and work with that. And I'm going to score, put this on my banding wheel, and we are going to score the parts that are going to make contact. I have a summer tumblers and a one-piece travel mug tutorial. So if you want to see a little bit closer up on how to add lids and make these travel, like more of a traveling function, you can look at one of those tutorials and I really walk you through. So this guy, I'm just going to put a little bit of slip on both sides, really minding those corners because that's really where you are going to have to make sure the join is strong. Okay, I'm going to follow my original line there. And then now that I feel like it is exactly where I want it, I'm going to put some pressure, enough pressure where you can see slip coming out. Okay, that's really, really, really important, and making sure that you're putting a good amount of pressure on those corners. I'm going to bring this back up nice and easy right here, and I'll show you how to finish that. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm hanging over just a little bit on this side. So I'm just going to take my shark fin and I'm going to take off that little bit of extra there. Same with this side. Take off that little bit of extra there. So now it's nice and flush. So I'm going to come through, whoops, with the shark fin, caught a little bit, and see that slip that I'm picking up. That's what we want to see coming out of there. And I'm just going to keep going over this sponge here. Keep going over this area. Now I'm going to flip my shark fin around and use the curved part. And I'm just going to put in a rough join here. We will make this look really pretty, I promise. And when I cut that, just a little piece of clay kicked out. So I'm going to just get rid of that little piece of clay. All right. Flipping this over, blending that in. Now that I have a rough join there, I'm going to come in here, make sure that little guy is sealed, making sure that guy is sealed on that side. We will do all our finishing on our lip in just a second. And then I'm going to grab my red shaping rib, and this is where I really start to do some work and coming in, smoothing this out, smoothing it up and over to make sure it's got a really nice mouthfeel. Remember, the front of this is where lips are going to be. I'm going to do a straw in here, so it's not as big a deal, but I still like, even if it's a straw, I still like to have that lip really nice and smooth. I make that really seamless there. We want this to look like a one-piece construction, like that lip was on there the whole time. We don't want people to see our attachment points where we add stuff on. Okay, I'm going to continue on here. And I would come through with this, and I would shape this a bunch, but you get the idea how we're already starting to erase that. That's looking nice, coming smooth over the top. And then our final finishing on that would be with a sponge. I'm going to poke my hole now. I've got these slender stainless steel straws that I like to use. I use a hole punch that will fit that easily. I'm going to pick my center point, and I'm going to put my hand in to support from the outside. Let's see here if I can get you, excuse me, get you a better view for this. Go. There we go. There you are. Okay, so I'm just finding the middle. I'm going to make sure I'm clearing my rim. I'm going to support from the inside, and I'm just going to twist and give even pressure straight up and down. There we go. I can feel it come through. And then I like to rock this back and forth just to give my hole a little bit more space. Pop in that little plug there. I'll get that out later. So there's our hole. People can just drink from that as well. But really what I like to sell these for are summer drinks. This will shrink enough in glaze, bisque and glaze firing, where this straw ends up peeking out just about that much. And then I just make sure that my straw has enough freedom of motion. When this is leather hard and this top isn't so vulnerable, I will come through with the sponge. Now, this has quite a bit of sagging already, but what I like to do is come in with my anvil, if that was a flatter piece, and I would come and shape that, but I've already got that going. And there we go. We've got our one piece kind of travel accessory on there that will fit a straw. Easy peasy. So that is our large. This is our 6F. F stands for faceted. This is our 6F faceted jig. Move this guy over, make some room. And then the bottom cutter that comes with the combo if you do order it in combination. So thanks for stopping by. I hope you had a lot of fun. If you have any questions or if you want to show me what your cup looks like after you're done making it, I would love that. Thanks for joining me, and we'll see you next time. Happy making, y'all.